The Purge by J.W. Eliot. Copyright 2021 by J.W. Eliot. Narrated by David Sweeney Bear. The Purge. "The temple is burning!" The cry rang through the tranquil halls of the library. Jerome jerked his head up. He'd become so absorbed in the delicate script and beautiful words of the book, he hadn't noticed the smell of burning wood floating in through the open window that now mingled with the rich aroma of ink, paper, and leather. Chairs scuffed against the wooden floor, and robes rustled as scholars scrambled to the narrow windows overlooking the great courtyard where the white sundial stabbed into the sky. A red beam of light smashed into the library, shattering the golden stained-glass window and slamming into the long rows of leather-bound volumes. Books and wooden shelves exploded in a rolling inferno. Exclamations of dismay erupted as the glass tinkled to the floor and the roar of flames growled to a crescendo. Jerome leapt to his feet, snatching up the little volume he had been studying as the scholars of the light scrambled to escape the hungry flames. Dara rushed into the library, past the fleeing scholars, with her long black hair flying out behind her. Her robe billowed in ragged tatters. Soot streaked her face. Even in disarray, with her face tight with terror, she was still as beautiful as she had been the first day he had met her, nearly 20 years before. "They're killing the Chosen!" she gasped. She brushed away the hair that clung to her sweating brow. "Who is?" "The Transcendents." Jerome cursed. The keepers of the light, who called themselves the Transcendents, arrogantly assumed they knew better how to worship the light. They had become ever more aggressive and hostile to any who opposed them, but he could not believe they would do this. "Why? What happened?" Dara grabbed his hand and pulled him toward the door. "Ross killed a priest. He killed Errol." "What?" Jerome gaped at her. Ross was probably the most powerful of the Chosen, the scholars who studied the light. He was next in line to become a keeper of the light, priests who governed the Chosen and directed their work. The keepers were selected from the most powerful, most accomplished of the Chosen. Ross was the last person who would kill one of them. "He said something about knowing what happened to the Chosen who disappeared," Dara said. Jerome stared. Every few years, one of the Chosen, usually a young one, would vanish from their lodgings without a trace. People speculated that they had run away or been kidnapped. Jerome had long wondered what the truth was. What had Ross learned that would cause him to attack the keepers? "So," Jerome said. "So he killed one of the priests, like I said." "How?" "I don't know." The desperation in Dara's voice sent a chill through him. Something more sinister was going on here. He dragged Dara to a stop just inside the doors of the great library. If the keepers of the light thought the Chosen had turned on them, they would wreak a hideous revenge. "Get the children. I'll meet you at our apartment." Dara grabbed his hand. "No, come with me now, before it's too late." "I can't." Jerome cast his gaze around at the inferno. "I have to help. The stone is here." Dara stared at him, tight-lipped for a moment before giving a curt nod. She pulled him into a fierce kiss. "Come back to me," she whispered, and disappeared down the long hallway. A knot pinched Jerome's throat, making it hard to breathe. He blinked at the sting of tears and rushed to the section of the library where the mystics of light kept their most ancient and precious texts. He had to do something. The devouring flames licked hungrily at the old dry pages that contained the wisdom of thousands of years and the knowledge of countless chosen ones. The vast and irreplaceable treasure trove of knowledge that had nourished and enriched the worship of the light fell prey to the ignorance and presumption of a few keepers who insisted on a new path. Jerome hesitated. He would save so many volumes if he could, but he could not carry them all. He jerked a tiny, leather-bound book with silver writing from the shelf and slipped it into his pocket. The 2 books he now held contained the ancient worship of the light as it had been received from Illurion, the creator herself. If nothing else survived, these must. A cry burst from the doorway, and Jerome spun to find it clogged with scholars desperate to escape the raging inferno. But the scholars were being pushed back into the burning library, stumbling over one another. "What are you doing?" someone shouted. A green light lanced into the crowd of black-robed chosen ones, cutting through them like a lightning bolt. Shrieks of terror and pain echoed through the library as bodies flew backward, trailing green smoke. Bits of clothing floated in the air, suspended in the heat of the betrayal. Jerome ducked behind a row of books as the survivors scattered. Yellow, blue, and red bolts of light chased them, scything through them like a sharp blade through grain. Jerome knew he should race to find the sacred stone and maybe save some of the precious books, but he was rooted to the spot, peeking from behind the shelves, watching in stunned terror, unable to believe what he was seeing. A few keepers appeared in the doorway. The transformation in their countenances shocked Jerome almost as much as the horror of what they were doing. They had all been older men, but now they appeared as though they had aged 50 years. Their skin sagged on their emaciated faces, and the fingers they pointed at the fleeing chosen seemed more skeleton than living. Leith led the pack, with a gleeful grin, as his red light ripped into the chosen, burning and destroying. "What have you done?" Jerome whispered. Leith and the other priests who called themselves the Transcendents had been probing the depths of the light in their search for a new path. They said they would transcend the old, worn-out forms of worship and inaugurate an era of rebirth by preserving the best minds in the study of the light, so the knowledge did not have to be relearned with each new generation. It had always been a dangerous yet enticing proposition. Many of the chosen had joined them, but it had changed them. The once wise old men who had tutored the chosen had become demons of darkness, bent on the destruction of the true worship of the light at any cost. Their haughtiness sickened Jerome. Did they think they could replace the Creator and become the focus of the worship of the light? The grim scene before him transfixed Jerome, despite the urgency gnawing at him. He had to do something. The Keepers of the Light were actively murdering the chosen and destroying the knowledge of the ages. Several of the chosen who were still alive gathered in a group and fought back. Their own beams of light replied to the power surging from the Keepers until a blinding kaleidoscope of color flashed and burned about the library. But their light was feeble in comparison, and they were soon swept away amid the rainbow of death. Jerome choked on the despair that scoured his throat. Heat from the fire in the library became oppressive as the shrieks of dying scholars split the air. The Keepers turned toward Jerome. Leith looked right at him. A smile curved his lips, and he raised a hand in his direction. Jerome jumped to his feet and sprinted for the back of the library. A beam of red light chased him into the stacks, cutting through his robes. Books leapt into the air, erupting into flames. Desperation gave Jerome renewed speed as he wove his way amid the destruction, seeking the tiny alcove where the treasure lay. It was an object long thought lost, but which had been carefully preserved and protected by the secret elite who called themselves the true believers. They understood the prophecies and knew the time would come when the Keepers of the Light would turn upon their own. They had foreseen this very day and prepared for it, though Jerome knew they had not expected this vicious butchery of the chosen. Jerome was not one of the leaders, but he knew about their most prized possession. He could not leave the library without trying to save it. He slipped into a small recess that held a little-used altar of the true believers with its polished white stones. The sacred stone was hidden here somewhere. Would he have time to find it and escape? The tiny room felt cool compared to the heat devouring the hall behind him. Invisible energy pulsed from the altar as if it were calling to him through the chaos and destruction. He placed his hands on the altar, closed his eyes, and tried to still his racing heart. The treasure, an ancient power Jerome knew almost nothing about, would only yield itself to one who had no desire to use it for personal gain. A light flashed, and a diminutive panel slid open to reveal a beautiful, clear stone with delicate silver writing. A spiderweb pattern had been etched into its surface. Inside the stone, a geometric design, with a full circle in the middle and a half circle on either side, pulsed a silver light. Jerome gasped at the simple magnificence of the stone. He knew this symbol, the triple moon that represented the 3 phases of the moon, waxing, full, and waning. It was also called the triple goddess, and showed the 3 phases of womanhood, maiden, mother, and crone, representing the cycle of Illyrian's struggle with Shaheen, the child of light who refused to join in the song of creation. It symbolized Shaheen's refusal to participate in the creation, her rebellion, and her ultimate destruction. Jerome had heard stories of the 2 cosmic stones, the eyes of Illyrian, the protectors of the temple. Illyrian herself was said to have prepared them for the end time, when the Promised One would finally come to purify the light. She had touched them with her finger and so imparted a portion of her power to each stone. This was one such stone, but Jerome did not know where the other might be. An overwhelming sense of awe and reverence filled him as he reached out a trembling hand and lifted the cool stone from its hiding place. At his touch, a brilliant silver light flashed and poured from it. His whole body tingled with the sensation, and he almost dropped the stone in shock. The stones were reputed to produce such light, but he did not have time to consider the wonder of the ancient sacred object. He placed it carefully in his pocket next to the books and turned to face a raging inferno that filled the doorway. The heat of it burned his face. He was trapped. There was no way out. He put his hand in his pocket to feel the cool comfort of the stone. Silver light burst from his pocket as his hand touched it, and he flinched with surprise. A scraping, scratching sound came from behind him, and he spun, jerking his hand free from his pocket, readying for a fight. But a woman's head poked out of a passage in the wall, her long black hair brushing the floor. She paused, apparently as startled to see him there as he was to see her. A tunnel? Here, in the library? "Elaine," Jerome said. "Do you have it?" she demanded. Her golden earring glittered in the light of the fire, contrasting sharply with her dark skin and black hair. "Yes." "Then come, we must escape." Jerome did not bother arguing. He ducked into the tunnel, fell to his hands and knees, and crawled into the cool blackness. The door scraped closed behind him, and the darkness engulfed them. "We've sent as many of the Chosen and their families as we can to the chambers," Elaine said. "But the priests are slaughtering all of the Chosen, even those who joined the Transcendents." "I saved the Book of Light," Jerome said. Elaine paused in crawling, and he bumped into her. "Well done," she said, and began to shuffle along again. "There's only one safe place for it." Jerome banged his head off the low ceiling. The tiny space pressed in upon him, and it became hard to breathe. Panic gripped his throat. He yanked the silver stone from his pocket, desperate for the light to push back the suffocating darkness. The light from the stone burst through the tunnel, cool and reassuring. Elaine stopped and craned her head around to peer back at him. Wonder and surprise shone in her face. "How did you do that?" "What?" "The stones only shine for those selected by Illyrian to wield them." Jerome hesitated. "I just picked it up, and it glowed like this." "The stones have been used only one other time," Elaine explained. "When Shaheen herself invaded the temple and began killing the Chosen." Jerome gouged his knee on one of the stones lining the floor of the tunnel, and he grimaced. He had never heard this tale. "She even entered the sacred chamber," Elaine continued, "and tried to throw down the altar, but a Chosen named Eliezer called power from the stones and forced her to withdraw, saving the Temple of Light. She has never tried to come back." "You think she's behind what the Keepers are doing now?" "Of course," Elaine said, as if this should have been obvious, even to the most witless child. A new sense of hope and excitement sounded in her voice. "Jerome, the stones must have selected you to fight for us, to be our protector." Jerome glanced down at the beautiful stone. "I'm only a scholar." Elaine continued crawling, and Jerome hurried to catch up. The stones have chosen you, she insisted. You must find the other. Jerome followed, using one hand so he could still hold up the light of the silver stone. What about Dara and the children? He asked. I'll get them out. You must find the other stones so you can stop this. How? I'm not one of its caretakers. Use that stone, she said, pointing back at the one in his hand. They know each other. The moonstone is the seeking stone. It seeks out dangers to the temple, and it finds the one who can wield the stones. It will take you to its sister stone. Their breathing became ragged as they continued down the long tunnel. The sunstone concentrates the powers of the stones, Elaine panted, and the mind of the one who holds them. To truly wield the power of the stones, you must hold both of them in your hands. The stones will then seek and destroy the enemies of the Temple of Light. Do you know where the sunstone is? No, only 2 of the caretakers know the exact location of each stone, and they were both just murdered. I know it is in a secret chamber below the temple. That is all. How do you know all this? A long silence ensued, broken only by the scraping of their shuffling crawl down the sloping tunnel. I led the true believers, she said. You? Jerome gasped. But I never... Don't sound so shocked. Well, Jerome didn't know what to say. He and Elaine had grown up together in the temple. They had been chosen the same year. I can't do this, he said. Elaine scowled over her shoulder at him. You have no choice. The stones have called you. They scrambled through the tunnel until they came to a small doorway. Elaine poked her head in and then slipped through. Jerome followed. He dropped the stone into his pocket as he found himself in one of the dwellings below the temple. Clothes and dishes lay scattered everywhere, evidence of the occupants' hasty retreat. He and Elaine picked their way across the room to the wooden door. Elaine peered out and gestured for him to follow. They had only gone a few paces when the scuffling sound of scurrying feet reached their ears. Jerome spun, expecting to see some terrified chosen seeking to escape the murderous priests. But Laith stepped around the corner they had just passed and smiled at them. Where his eyes had once been, a new and terrible blood-red light burned. His skin sagged on his skull as if it were about to slide off. He raised his hands. Run, Elaine said in an urgent whisper. Find the stone. She turned to face Laith. Jerome grabbed at her sleeve. Don't, come with me. Elaine swatted his hand away. He saw in her gaze that she expected to die. My duty is to the stones and the chosen, she whispered. I am counting on you to save them both. Now go. Jerome swallowed the horrible knot in his throat and fled as the crackling sound of power erupted in the corridor behind him. He drew the stone from his pocket and experienced the comforting coolness of its power. Find your sister stone, he murmured. A beam of silver light shot down the corridor, and Jerome sprinted to follow it. The light led him deep beneath the temple, through a series of strange doorways he had not known existed, until he clambered up a makeshift ladder into a tiny room. He bent low before a low altar of polished wood. The sunstone must be here somewhere. He touched the altar, but nothing happened. So he laid the moonstone on it. The stone continued to glow. A click sounded, and a door on the altar slid open. The golden sunstone lay on a velvet cushion. It was round like the moonstone and covered in the same delicate writing. Carved in its center was a large black spider. Jerome hesitated before picking it up. A beautiful golden light burst from the stone, and an immense sense of power filled him almost to bursting. He wanted to kneel there and bask in the glory of these stones, but he had no time for worship. After slipping the Book of Light into the drawer of the altar, he pushed it closed. The book would be safe here until he could come back for it. Then he backed out of the chamber and retreated the way he had come, trying to memorize the twists and turns so he could return the sunstone to its hiding place if he survived. Pausing at each door, he scratched the tiny symbol of the eye in the palm of the hand, just to make sure he could find his way again. When he came out into the main tunnel, he stopped. Sounds of crying reached him. He dashed to the sacred chamber of light under the central courtyard. A woman crouched beside the altar, clutching 2 infants to her. One of the babies cried while the woman tried to hush it. The room was flooded with bright light, even though it was deep underground. Gold writing covered the white marble walls. Huge columns rose up to support the ceiling, while the stone altar sat directly in the center of the circular chamber. The stones in Jerome's hands pulsed in response to the power emanating from the altar. Jerome stepped into the room, and the woman lunged to her feet, her eyes wild with terror. "I won't hurt you," he said. She backed away from him. She had deep olive skin and black hair. Her white robe was stained with ash and blood. "They're killing us all," she stammered. "I know," Jerome said as he struggled with indecision. He needed to run and confront the priests, to stop them, so he could find Dara and his own children. The wrenching fear that something might happen to them was almost paralyzing, but he couldn't leave this woman alone and defenseless. He strode to a little writing stand, grabbed a piece of paper, and scribbled the directions to the chamber from which he had just come. He scrawled them down twice, just in case he would need them again, and tore one set of instructions off to give to her. "Follow these directions. They will take you to a chamber where you can hide." She adjusted the children in her arms so she could take the scrap of paper. "If you get confused, just check under the latch on the door. The symbol of the eye in the center of the hand is scratched there to show the way." She nodded her thanks and raced into the tunnel. The echo of the baby's cries faded as she disappeared down the long, winding corridors. Jerome scratched the symbol he had just described into the second set of instructions, stuffed them in his pocket, and sprinted from the room. As he ascended through the tunnels, the reek of burning nearly choked him. Fumes had settled into the chambers, filling them with caustic smoke. He burst into the central courtyard, where the sacred sundial jutted into the sky. Flames from the burning library jumped and gyrated in a wild, chaotic dance of death and destruction. Bodies lay strewn about the white cobblestones. The ghastly scene forced tears from his eyes. How could they do this? The ones who were supposed to protect and nourish the servants of the light had become their executioners. A groan reached his ears, and he scanned the courtyard until his gaze fell on a form that had been tied to the white spire of the sundial. He rushed over to find Ross Kellin sagging against the ropes that bound him. His clothes were burned and torn. His flesh was raw. Bits of it had been savagely shredded. Blood dripped to the white cobblestones in a steady, haunting rhythm. "Ross?" Jerome breathed. Ross raised his head and blinked at him. "I have failed." "Why did you do it?" "I had no choice," Ross whispered. "They were going to kill my family, my little boy." "But why?" "Because I defied them." Jerome thought of Dara and his children. Had Elaine found them? Had Elaine survived her encounter with Leith? "I have the stones," Jerome said. Ross blinked at him. "Elaine said they were prepared to protect the temple." Recognition shone in Ross's burned and mutilated face. "The cosmic stones," he whispered. "That is what I lacked. If only I had possessed them." Jerome frowned in pity and laid a hand on Ross's arm, searching for the words to explain what had happened. "They work for me, but I don't know how to use them." Ross shook his head. "It's too late. I'm broken. You must do this, Jerome." With a gasp, he said, "Save the Chosen." Ross's head fell forward and he went limp. For a moment, Jerome thought Ross was dead, but his chest still rose and fell. Jerome untied the ropes and lowered his friend to the ground. The horror gave way to a deep sense of destiny. Jerome had only ever lived for this moment, to be the one to wield the cosmic stones in defense of the Temple of Light and the Chosen. Jerome straightened. He had to find the priests. He had to stop this. But first, he had to ensure Dara and the children were safe. He could not sacrifice them. He would not. A cackle rang over the roar of the inferno consuming the library. Jerome spun, gripping a stone in each hand. Leith strode from the shadows to stand in the yellow-orange light of the dancing flames. The breath caught in Jerome's throat. How had he come to be here? Where was Elaine? Mingling terror and fury burned in his chest. Leith's eyes churned with an insane red fire, and the flesh was falling off his face. But he didn't seem to notice or care. His robes were smoking, and he favoured his right side. Apparently Elaine had injured him, but not conquered. Jerome tried not to think of her body lying broken and bleeding in the tunnel. Perhaps, with the aid of the stones, he could finish off Leith for her. "What have you done?" Jerome shouted. "How could you do this?" "We will transcend the failure that has gone before." Leith's voice was harsh and laboured. "To transcend, we must purge the temple of the dross." He raised his hands, and a jet of red light slashed toward Jerome, who stumbled back in panic, willing the stones to come to his aid. A silver and golden light flashed, and Leith's red fire exploded into a geyser of light that threw Jerome backward. Leith's fire had not reached him. The stones had protected Jerome. A scream of rage burst from Leith's skeletal maw. "What is this?" Jerome regained his balance in time to receive another burst of power from Leith. Again the stones flared, and again Jerome was driven back, except this time he kept his feet and responded by sending a golden ball of fire rolling toward Leith. The flame enveloped Leith, and for one desperate moment, hope flared in Jerome's heart. Maybe he could do it. Jets of red fire crackled through Jerome's attack, and his ball of power exploded. Leith stood before him, a portion of his garments burned away, and his charred flesh smoking. He barked a deep, rumbling laugh that sent a chill up Jerome's spine. "Holy Mother of Light!" Jerome gasped. "What have they become?" The ground rumbled under Jerome's feet and heaved, sending him sprawling headlong into the white cobblestones, now stained with ash and blood. Dyron, another of the keepers who had joined the Transcendents, strode into the courtyard before the sundial. Jerome scrambled to his feet just as a jet of indigo fire roiled toward him to join the blast of red light Leith cast at him. In desperation, Jerome called for the power of the stones. They flared and intercepted the power of the keepers, but he was driven back. They were too strong. He might have been able to withstand one, but not two. Panic gripped his throat. "Dara," he whispered. He could not leave her to this. He lashed out with the power of the stones and fled across the courtyard to the section of the temple where he and Dara had their living quarters. He had to get her and the children away. Then he would return to die, for die he must. To his horror, he found the doors of the homes of the Chosen forced open, bent inward on their hinges, charred and smoking. The odour of burning wood and roasting flesh filled the corridor. Terror gripped his throat. Had he sent Dara into the path of the keepers? He burst into their rooms, and a priest spun to face him. It was Dur. His face had undergone the same monstrous transformation as Leith's, and his eyes shone a brilliant liquid blue. Dur held up a piece of paper. "What does this mean?" he demanded. "Which chamber? What place?" Jerome swallowed the panic that choked him. Dara had left him a note. "Have you learned how to use the chambers?" Dur asked. "Please," Jerome said, tightening his grip on the stones. Their warmth filled him, washing away his despair. He could do this. The stones had chosen him. He called for the power just as Dur shot out his hand, and a burst of blue light slammed into Jerome's chest. He flew backward against the wall, flailing like a fragment of cloth in the wind. His head cracked against the stone, and he fell into black oblivion. Jerome stirred at the rending pain in his chest and his head. His eyelids felt heavy as he struggled to open them. Something warm and sticky clung to his cheek. Dara. Where was Dara? He crawled to his hands and knees. Dur had gone, but the note he had held lay on the floor. Jerome picked it up, staining it red with his blood. It was her handwriting. She had fled. She had escaped. But he had failed. The temple had fallen, and he would die like the rest of them. He patted his pocket. His only hope now was to protect the stones and find Dara. It was clear to him now that he had never been powerful enough to defeat the priests. He was a simple scholar. He had never studied the power as a weapon, and that had proven to be a fatal mistake. Jerome clambered to his feet, swaying at the surge of dizziness and nausea. He climbed onto the bed and pulled a loose stone from the wall. Dara used it to hide the books of light they often sneaked from the library for personal study. Jerome slipped the second book into the cavity, placed Dara's note on top of it, and then settled the sunstone on top of them both. The sunstone burned with a golden fire until he withdrew his hand. He paused as a sense of doom swept over him. If the stones had selected him, why had they not protected him from Dur? Why had they allowed the chosen to be slaughtered? Elaine had been wrong. He had wasted precious time when he might have found Dara and escaped with her and their children. He could have taken the stones from the temple, kept them safe. Jerome glanced at the moonstone. It was his only hope now. It would lead him to Dara. It would find her. Then he could come back for the sunstone once his family was safe, and he would do what he could to avenge the fallen. He pulled out the slip of paper that held the directions to the tiny chamber, trying to remember how to get there. He stumbled out into the corridor and held up the moonstone when the sound of running footsteps reached him. Jerome staggered back into the room and pressed his body against the wall. His breathing was ragged as the terror raced through him. He trembled in a cold sweat. "I saw someone," a deep voice shouted. Jerome scanned the room, searching for a hiding place for the moonstone. He bent to slip it under the wardrobe when someone burst into the room behind him. Something slammed into his head, and he sprawled onto the table with a crash. He struggled to hide the moonstone under the wardrobe, desperate to protect it. Warm blood gushed down the side of his face. Darkness rushed in. He had failed. The purging of the Temple of Light was complete. The chosen had fallen. The palace guard raised his spear. Jerome made a feeble attempt to ward it away, but the long blade flashed as it buried itself in his side. He gasped at the new rush of agony. The world spun into the swirling blackness. The pain faded to numbness. The guard kicked him. "He's done for." His voice now seemed so far away. The slapping of boots on stone faded into the distance, and Jerome was alone with the pain and the regret. A white light appeared beside him. He blinked up at a boy dressed in a black robe who stepped from the light to stand over him. He wore a look of concern, and he extended a hand to him as if he expected Jerome to hand him the stone. Jerome struggled to rise, but he had no strength in his limbs. The boy frowned. "I'm sorry," Jerome tried to speak. Blood gurgled in his throat. He was paralyzed. Life was slipping from his body, dribbling onto the cool stones of the room that had once rung with the laughter of his children. A female voice burst through the pain and the darkness. "Die in peace, chosen one. You have saved the cosmic stones and the Book of Light for the one who will come." Jerome groaned as understanding rushed into him. He had never been meant to succeed in defeating the rogue priests. His only purpose had been to save the stones and the sacred writings from the fire and destruction. "The children are safe," the voice said, "and will return to the temple someday." "And Dara," he thought. "She came back for you," the voice said. No, a ragged sob escaped his throat. Not his beloved Dara. Why would she come back to such a place to face certain slaughter? But he already knew. It was the same reason he would have come for her. She loved him. Jerome quit resisting. The children were safe. The stones and the books were safe. His and Dara's lives had not been sacrificed for nothing. "Dara," he whispered. A woman stepped into the light and smiled at him. "Dara," he whispered again. "Where are our children?" "I sent them on," She smiled. She took his hand and pulled him to his feet. Jerome sighed, and his soul slipped free, leaving the pain and regret behind. The end. We hope you have enjoyed The Purge by J.W. Eliot, narrated by David Sweeney Bear. Please leave an honest review for us on Audible and Amazon. This is the short story prequel to the Worlds of Light trilogy. Continue the adventure with The Cleansing, Book 1 in the series. We invite you to visit J.W. Eliot's website at www.jweliot.com for more books like this one and for more information about the author. You can find his other books on Audible and on Amazon, in print and ebook. You can also enjoy free audiobooks and more on his YouTube channel. Thank you for listening.